this is Yamina again. Today I wanted to talk about loving yourself the way you are. And this is not a pep talk, this is just something I've been thinking about recently with hearing things like in the last 2 years. But first off, I want to start out with a story about a book that I read when I was in high school. I feel like I was in 10th grade, but I could have been in 11th grade. It was my first time being introduced to the author Toni Morrison before she passed away. Her work, not her as a person. So the first book I ever read by her was called The Bluest Eye. And that book, I actually was trying to do this video a few weeks ago, and I had to go back and read the summary of the book because I don't own the book myself. The reason why I don't own that book is because it was such a heartbreaking book. So premise of the book is that the main character was a dark-skinned black girl, African American girl, who was being abused in her life, and she felt like having blue eyes would make her more beautiful because that's what she was made to feel was beautiful. So being a blue-eyed white girl with blonde hair would make her beautiful, would make people treat her better, would make her not have to deal with all the things that she was dealing with. And when I reread the summary of that book, I started crying again because I was just like, oh my goodness. I didn't remember certain things that I had read in the book. Maybe I didn't understand them when I was a kid, or I had just forgotten from how long ago I had read it. But just a lot of stuff went on in the book, and it was deep within her that she was extremely unhappy not having blue eyes, and I couldn't imagine feeling that way. So that book is intense. Toni Morrison has like a great deal of art literature that she's written. I don't know if The Bluest Eye would be, I don't know, it could be the best piece for somebody to read first or not, but I know that book launched me into reading the rest of her works. But that was definitely my least favorite because I was so heartbroken that this little girl was not loved enough, was not praised enough to love herself and to appreciate who she was as she was. So that was heartbreaking for me. And what I've been hearing like in the last year or so, I was surprised, and thankfully it's not how they feel now, but I've heard two recent cases of two Asian American women who felt like because of the environment they grew up in predominantly white areas, that they wish that they had been white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired girls instead of being Asian because they didn't feel beautiful. They felt like they stood out too much. I watched a documentary on Korean adoptees. It's called Adopted, I think. And I found it on YouTube. And even some of those children, adults now, felt like they weren't beautiful because they were different, and that they weren't what's the word? They did not feel like they were encouraged and praised enough, told that they were beautiful enough to, just like the young lady from The Bluest Eye. Her name was Picola, I think, is the name of the main character in our book. But they didn't feel like they were told they were beautiful, and so they grew up with a complex. So anyway, these two other Asian American women that I was mentioning, I'm not going to mention them by names, but I believe they're both people that I follow on Instagram or on YouTube. But they felt that way at one time growing up. And thank goodness I never felt that way, because growing up in a predominantly African American area, and then also we had African immigrants and Caribbean immigrants and people who were from those regions who were also long lived in New York City. I grew up around a strong black presence, and I did not feel unbeautiful. I was picked on, but I was picked on for my skin color by people who look like me. To me, anyone looks like me if I could tell they're of African descent, and I don't care how dark or light they are. I say they look like me if I could tell they are of African descent. Usually predominantly African descent. But because I grew up in a family that had different skin tones of dark to light, but it felt like most of my family was more dark skinned. I wanted, or brown skin and dark skin, I wanted to look more like them. So I actually used to pray to God that one day I would miraculously wake up and have dark skin and I wouldn't be picked on. I would look more like my family. People wouldn't question my siblings being my siblings and wouldn't question my mother being my mother. More often, people would question my siblings being mine because of our skin tones. They didn't really have anything to say about my mom because I, I guess they felt like that wasn't worth questioning. But with my siblings, like, it was a big question because I was a different color, and so I would pray to be darker. So my spiel is coming off of Pecola wanted to look like a different race. The Asian American women that have brought out their feelings, and the Korean adoptees wanted to be white women with blonde hair, blue eyes. Me, I wanted to be a darker skinned black woman to look more like the rest of my family. And that was my maternal side of my family. But I found interesting, so on a different scale, when I was about 17 years old, my auntie, my maternal aunt, asked me, she's like, I know you don't believe in reincarnation. I do not believe in reincarnation. But she said, I know you don't believe in that, but if you did, what race would you want to be? And I said, you know what? I would want to be born as an Indian woman from India. And I said, you know what? But I believe in the resurrection, so I would be born as myself again, so I would still be black or African American. So I was like, you know what? I would be African American. I would be who I am now. That's what I would want to be born as again. And I said, but if I could choose between, I would be either or. But because of what I believe about the resurrection, we're brought back to, like, in the scriptures, there's like 8 stories of people who were brought back to life on earth, and that's not including Jesus' story, which he actually went back to heaven. But 8 people were brought back to life on earth, and they lived a certain amount of time, and then they died again. So they came back as themselves, like no one didn't recognize them being their race. So anyway, so I believe in the resurrection. So my aunt asked me that question, that was my answer. And then recently, like in the last few months, The Real, which is a talk show that used to be live on TV, but has now moved to the digital, completely digital, and they've been filming for like a little over a year online. Forget the details, but anyway, The Real is a panel of women of color who discuss different topics. They discuss topics about current events, they discuss celebrities, they discuss things that we as people would talk about. So they actually asked a question, and I forget why they asked the question, but they said, would you want to be another race? Who would it be? What race would it be? And I told them again, I would want to be an Indian woman, but I would want to be dark skinned. I would want to be a Christian Indian woman. But I said, but more than anything, I like being who I am. I would want to be myself. So I have always appreciated being African American because that's who I am, and I never felt the need to look like anyone else, to be like anyone else. But what I do like is that we can play with our hair, we can wear wigs or weaves, we could put in eye contacts for different colors because it's fun to change things up. But at the end of the day, I am still African American, and I prefer to be what I am, what I was born as, and how God created me. So I always feel bad for people who don't feel comfortable in their own skin. And I would hope that people find a way to feel comfortable in their own skin, even if they don't have someone to tell them, you're beautiful as you are. And I know, like, I appreciated the representation I felt like I saw on TV growing up, because there were a lot of black sitcoms that I would enjoy watching, because I ended up moving after college, after high school. I ended up moving out of New York City to a place that didn't have a large black population, and I could see how not being around people who look like you, not having people tell you that you're pretty, could mess up your head. And I appreciate that I had all of that growing up, and it had all of that kind of, I guess the word is validation. I had that growing up, even though I did get teased and bullied by random people in middle school, and mostly middle school, not elementary school and not high school. But yeah, so because I had that validation from my family, my mom was very, very, what's the word? She never picked favorites in her, amongst her 5 children. None of us were her favorites. We were all her favorites. We were all her children. She loved all of us. She gave us as much time as she could. And she never made us feel like one was better than the other. And because of the way I grew up, I never felt like my skin color was better than someone else's. I always thought dark skin, it was beautiful. I always thought people were beautiful no matter what their skin color are. I don't know what I just said. But I just think people are beautiful. And the biggest thing that makes people beautiful besides their outside, as I've matured, is definitely their personality, is what makes us the most beautiful, and how we treat people is makes us beautiful. So that's what I've come to appreciate. So yeah, I just feel bad for people who don't get that reassurance, and I'm just hoping that children growing up now are given that reassurance, because we are beautiful no matter how dark, how light we are, no matter what color our eyes are, no matter what kind of hair we have. We are beautiful as we are, because God created the diversity that we see in the world, and that's beautiful. So that's the end of my video. I'm sure I made sense, and I hope I touched someone with this. But yeah, it's amazing that the diversity in the world, and I love it. So that's the end of my video. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.